Good morning, everyone. We're just going to wait another minute or two for a few more to arrive. If you guys can hear me okay, send out a chat or something. At some point, I'll be muting everybody, but until the end for questions. But if you can hear me okay, just let me know. See the screen. Thanks, James. Thanks, Amanda. Okay, great. It's always good to start off with working technology for a webinar like this. Thank you, Anne. Yeah, right. Yep. James says it's boring when stuff works right. Yeah, I know sometimes you just get to go right to work. But when sometimes that's where the fun is. I remember when I have a joke with my wife Sarah, where it used to be when back in the day when I get a new piece of technology, if I didn't have to fiddle with it and futz with it a bit to make it work, it just wasn't fun. All right, I think we will get started, and a few others may join us as we go, and we'll just let them join in where they join in. So good morning, everyone. I am going to let's see, I'm going to mute everybody first here, and then we'll be able to unmute when there's questions. So thank you for spending some time with us this morning to learn about Microsoft Teams. I think you'll be pretty excited about what it does and the features it has. And a lot of you already have it, so that is really cool. You'll be able to get started with using it right away. So a little bit about how this morning's going to go. First of all, that's what I look if you've never met me in person. Um, we're going to talk about Microsoft Teams, and we're going to talk about the key features of it. And we're also going to have a little demonstration at the end. So the first part of it is going to be showing you some of the key features. And then afterwards, I'll actually bring up a live version of Microsoft Team and run it through its paces for you. During the presentation, feel free to ask questions using the chat window. And in the end, we'll unmute for any Q&A. And just feel free to ask questions as we go along, and I'll do my best to answer them. And if I think it might be answered later in the presentation, I might offer that as well until we get there. Then we'll have the Q&A. And at the very end of all of this, you're going to get a survey and the presentations via email. And so we'd really love you to fill out that survey because the feedback is very valuable in how these presentations go so that we can have more of them and have them be as effective and awesome as possible. So a little bit about what Office 365 is before we dive into Teams. So if you're not familiar with it or you're thinking about getting it, it's a monthly subscription service from Microsoft. And they have different tiers of services that include different offerings. It's what in the buzzwords world right now we call the cloud solution, which means that Microsoft hosts and manages all the applications and the data on their servers. And they have a 99.9% uptime guarantee. And Tobin Solutions, we specialize in helping people with migrating to Office 365, administering it for them, doing support and development. Another caveat we like to put in these presentations is that your experience with Office 365, including Microsoft Teams, including the features and functions that are available to you, largely depend on what client you use to access the service. And what I mean by client is, I mean, like, are you on a Windows computer or are you on a Mac? Are you coming from an Apple iOS device or are you, a phone or a tablet? Are you coming from Android device? Are you going to access it through a web browser like Internet Explorer or Edge or Chrome or Firefox or Safari? So all of those different variables, the operating system, the browser, the app, the device, all of those, as Microsoft makes these services available, sometimes there's feature parity, meaning that whatever they implement works across all those devices seamlessly. sometimes there's certain features and functions that only work within certain uh, combinations. So, you just want to be aware of that as you go through this, and you may find, um, that if you're wondering why a certain feature isn't available in one piece or another, you can, look at what client you're using it, and maybe go to a different one. So first of all, what is Microsoft Teams? If you haven't used it before, we try and come up, is it like texting or SMS or Messenger on your phone? Now, if you think about how you use that, maybe you've got some people you text back and forth with on your phone. Maybe you even got a group chat where you've got 5 or 6 people that you're chatting with back and forth on your phone, texting messages back and forth. Maybe even send PDFs or photos back and forth or web links. You would do a lot of times with coworkers. You may do it with friends or family. And in some ways, that's kind of what Microsoft Teams is like, because you can do all that with Microsoft Teams. Now, is it like Outlook or email? Kind of. It's not so much about email like you do with Outlook, but there are these conversation threads where you can send messages back and forth like you do with the texting. And you can also send and receive documents like you do with Outlook. Another question that comes up is it like Skype for business? If you're using Skype right now, or maybe you are, maybe you aren't, but with Skype you can do one-to-one chats, you can do group chats, meetings, video conferencing, desktop sharing, and yeah, you can do all that with Microsoft Teams. Maybe you're using SharePoint or OneDrive, or maybe Box or Dropbox or Google Drive, where you're sharing files and collaborating. Yeah, you can do that with Teams as well. Or if you've actually used one of Microsoft Teams' direct competitors like Slack or HipChat, it's absolutely like one of those applications. And we'll get into a little bit more as we go forward. You'll see how these things kind of shake out and how they look like one another. One thing we want to put in there is in Microsoft's roadmap for all their different technologies, many of you may be using Skype for Business. And if you're using Skype for Business for chatting and video conferencing and all of that, Microsoft has said that eventually, Skype for Business is being incorporated into Microsoft Teams. And when it's fully integrated, Skype for Business is going to go away and Teams is going to be the main application. So you don't have to give up Skype for Business right now. It's going to be around for a long time. But it is their intention to integrate the two and have Microsoft Teams be the default for chatting and video conferencing. Another thing, depending on how geeky you are and how much you know about Office 365, when you create a Microsoft team, in the back end, you're actually creating an Office 365 group. And that's kind of a construct that Office 365 has for security and permissions and who's allowed to access certain things. And the other thing that happens when you create a team, it also creates a SharePoint document library along with a couple other things all in the background. Now, if you have an existing group, you can add a team to it. And if you have a team, you can also go and find the group, including the document library. So if you're using the document library in SharePoint directly, you'll see some folders in there that relate to Teams, and you can get access to files that way. I try to keep these webinars at kind of a plain language, high level, but sometimes people kind of run into seeing their documents in other places, and I want to give them some background on why they might see it in the groups. So here's a little bit about Teams. This is a screenshot of the application, and you'll see that with the Teams, you're going to have everyone's in the know. And you can have private or group chat, you can share files, and you can co-author content. So this arrow points here on Teams, you'll see the different teams that are available. So in this screenshot, you'll see a team called Northwind Traders. And below that, you're going to see different channels. And we'll get a little bit more about what that means shortly. And then within each channel, you have different tabs for the conversations around that channel, the files, or other apps that you have available. You can see there's some conversations going back and forth here. And you can chat about what's going on in these channels. So if you were in the Northwind Traders team and you were in the marketing channel, when you chat here, you can send messages back and forth. It stays within that channel. You can also kick off meetings. And, Teams, the application not only shows you the the teams themselves and the channels and the files and data associated with that, but it actually shows you other work that you're working on, even outside of a team. So you can get access to it that way. So it becomes this place where you can really, if you're a desktop user and you're in these things a lot, you can kind of spend most of your day inside Microsoft Teams and get to and access a lot of your work. Uh, if it's file-based things, Word, Excel, and all of that. And we will get more into that when we do the demonstration later on. So this kind of gives you a general overview of it. So a little bit more about teams and channels. So the teams are the collection of people, content, tools around different projects or departments, depending on how you want to look at it. And this is where you get to start to figure out what's going to make sense for you as you create the teams. And we do recommend, on your own or with Tobin as an advisor, to sit down and go through how best to create your teams and channels, because it can get a little out of control sometimes if you don't plan it, and then people will, sometimes there might be too many teams or too many channels or things like that. So you want to have a little insight and planning before you create those. So within the team, you have channels, and the channels are dedicated sections within the team, and all the conversations and files and all of that get broken down. So you can see within this Northwind Traders example, that's the team name, and below that there's a different channel. By default, you get a channel called General that gets created as soon as you create a team. And then you can add additional channels for different subtopics or different departments, or however it is you look for it. And then within each channel, you can have its files and chats and all of that. So those are the two main constructs within Microsoft Teams, are teams and channels. So here's some examples of some things. So, you can create your own, but just to get a little better example of how things go, let's say you had a sales team. So you might create a team within Microsoft Teams and you'd call it sales. And then maybe some channels you want to create underneath the sales team might be annual sales meeting, quarterly business review, monthly sales pipeline, sales playbook, and so forth. So you can see how those channels show up underneath the team, or maybe you've got something, maybe you're maybe doing a build out in your office. You could create a new team called the build out team. And then underneath the channels, you might have something called budget, and another channel called change orders, and another channel called architecture, things like that. So, it gives you an idea of different ways you can set this up. Now, Teams doesn't directly relate to how you'd set up like folders on your server, but in some ways, you can sort of think about it in terms of the channels that might be considered like folders, although they're not quite folders. And I'll show you what that looks like in a bit. Any quick questions while you're starting to digest some of this? Okay. So a little bit more about the chatting and conversations. Within Teams, they call it chat-based or conversation-based collaboration because, it's kind of how we work, right? You have our, when you think about the traditional ways we would work, there'd be, our server, and there'd be folders and files within there and things like that. And then we'd have our email, and our email would be conversations back and forth within our company, or maybe obviously with outside people. And sometimes we'd be sending files back and forth and talking about the files via email. And sometimes, it would be back and forth, almost like a conversation. You'd be emailing somebody, sometimes down the hall from you, maybe from another location, but you might have, 10 emails in 10 minutes as you're going back and forth on a conversation with something. So instead of having those conversations show up around emails, they show up in Teams as chats. And you can have one-to-one chats with individuals. You can have group chats. You can have chats within channels, So you can have, let's say I just wanted to chat back and forth with one of my managers. I could chat and just pick them as a name and chat back and forth. Maybe I want to chat back and forth with my whole management team. I could select all of those people, excuse me, and chat with them. Maybe I want to chat within a team we've got set up. So maybe I'm talking about one of those teams, like I said, like that office build out, and I want to talk with the people in charge of the budget. I can go inside the team. I can pick, so in this example, you can see it says Northwind Traders and Marketing, but this could easily be build out and budget. And when I start chatting within here, all of those chats stay inside that channel. Or maybe I am chatting around a specific document. I can actually be in a document and start a chat back and forth. So in this example, they show a PowerPoint document that they're talking about, and they can chat back and forth about that document. And I can also kick off meetings with people from within here. So you can see some icons down at the below. I can click the little camera icon and either set up a meeting right away with people if I want to do a video conferencing, or I can schedule a meeting and share my desktop and do some of those features. So the brilliance of Teams is not only do you have your documents there, but you also have the conversations around those documents all in one place. So you don't have to, go into email, go back into Office, do those things. You can just be in one spot. Someone said our chat's archived, and the answer is yeah, these don't go away. They all stay within here just like documents would. So, they don't, when you close out of Teams, the conversations don't disappear. They stay there as a permanent record within the team, within the system. Kind of like on your phone, if you're chatting back and forth with somebody or texting back and forth, those texts never go away until you actually go ahead and delete them. So another nice thing about that is, let's say you have some conversations going back and forth within a channel or within a team or around a document, and then you invite someone new to the team who hasn't been part of that team. When they join the team, they can go back and read those conversations around that document or around that channel. So those don't disappear. Thanks for the question, Leaf. So also within Teams, you can actually have your files and collaboration. So within each team and within the channels, you can actually create new documents. You can upload documents. You can see we've got some sample documents here, capacity planning, capacity. You can see that's a Word doc. That's an Excel spreadsheet. You can even add cloud storage for other systems. So let's say you guys are also using Dropbox. You can actually click here, add Dropbox as cloud storage, and be able to see the files within Teams. So if you've got access to Dropbox and you have permissions in there, you can actually see that within here. Same for Box, ShareFile, Google Drive. So one of the other things you start to see with Microsoft and used to be for Microsoft, it used to be a Microsoft world. Everything was Microsoft, and if you wanted to use something, it had to be Microsoft. They're really getting clear that they've got to be able to integrate with other solutions out there because they don't always have the best of breed, or people are living in a world where they've got stuff in Dropbox and got stuff in Google Drive and got stuff in ShareFile. So to be able to integrate that works really well within Teams. And you'll be able to see within files here, we'll talk about this a little bit later on, but you can create new documents right within Teams using a web browser. You can upload documents. If you've got documents stored in SharePoint, you can add them here as well or see them in SharePoint. And the other nice thing that if you haven't started using it yet, if you're using a traditional file server and someone is, let's say, working on a Word document and you want to work on that Word document as well, you open it up and it says, oh, that document's read only, and you can open up a copy of it or wait till they're done. One of the features when you're storing your documents up in Office 365, either in SharePoint, in Teams, you can actually use a new feature that Microsoft has called co-authoring, and that allows multiple people be in the same document at the same time, and that can be really handy. For example, at Tobin Solutions, we have a weekly leadership meeting, and prior to the leadership meeting, we're working on the agenda and people are updating their information in preparation for the meeting. Well, that agenda is shared. So by having it as co-authoring, a lot of times, the last 10 minutes before the meeting, people are making their updates. They can actually all be in the document, or we can all be in the document at the same time, making our edits and changes. So when the meeting starts, we're ready to go. So handy feature with that co-authoring. So the activity feed, you can start to see, when you think about probably the closest analog for most of you for what you would see is like Microsoft Outlook. When you're in Outlook, you can see new messages that show up in your inbox. It puts a little number there to tell you how many new messages you have that are unread. You can see them in the different folders. If you have calendar appointments, things like that, you'll start to see those show up. Within Teams, you have what's called the activity feed. Because if you've got, 5 teams, 10 teams, 20 teams, and everyone's working on things, you may want to be able to jump in and see what's happening in those teams, as opposed to having to go into each team and look and see what's happening, which is fine. You can totally do that. But you may want to get notified. And so if you follow certain channels, like maybe you're part of a team, and that example I was using with the office build out, maybe you're on the budget team, really more on the budget side of things. You don't focus on the architecture or the change orders. So you can create a channel called the budget channel underneath there, and then you follow that budget channel. And then anytime people are making updates in that channel by adding new documents or chatting back and forth, you'll actually see that show up in the activity. And what's really nice about that is it gives you insight into what's happening, into the stuff you care about, without having to go in and dig for it. Additionally, within the activity, you can see what you worked on. So there'll be a selection within activity where you can pick my activity, and it'll show you the last couple days of things you've worked on if you want to go see where something you chatted about, a document you updated, things like that. So it keeps it track of what you're doing and what you're interested in to try and centralize it in one spot so you can quickly go in and see what's happening. That's especially great, it can be part of your day, right? You can have it set up that first thing in the morning, you come in and you check your activity, just like you might check your inbox in Outlook. You can check your activity here and see the things that are relevant to you. Another nice thing with Teams is when you look at the interface, by default, when you create a team, you get 2 tabs. So in this example, there's the Northwind Traders and there's a marketing channel. And you have 2 tabs here called Conversations and Files. Those get created automatically by default as soon as you create a team and a new channel. And for a lot of people, that's where they're going to spend like 80% of their time, maybe 90% of their time. But to make it more effective and to customize Teams in a way to give people quick access to things that are either in Teams or external to Teams, you can add new tabs with apps or links to files. So for example, let's say there's a channel under that team we're going to create for an office build out. And under that team, there's going to be the office build out, there's a budget channel. And in that budget channel, there's one main budget spreadsheet that we're going to use. There might be other spreadsheets, but there's just budget. That's the one most people are going into that channel to look at. You can actually create a link right on the top to go right to that budget spreadsheet, so they don't have to drill down through the files and folders. And you can create multiple links to spreadsheets, other documents. You can also create links to other applications. So if you're using Microsoft Planner, or you're using some other external services like other project management systems, odds are high there's an integration point with Teams where you can then create a link to that so that when someone goes into Teams, they only have to go to that one spot and they can click on Planner or click on Trello or whatever it is that you're working on and be able to get a quick access to that all in one spot. Any quick questions? Take a pause here and grab a sip of coffee. Anybody got any questions? Okay, we will keep moving on. This is a big requested feature, and Microsoft started adding it in the last year, and that is guest access. So right now within Microsoft Teams, all of your internal users need an Office 365 license. But like in that, in that example of a build out, adding an Office expansion, maybe I'm working with an outside architecture firm, and I want them to have access to the team so they can update drawings or make comments or just be part of the team, right? Because it's not just our internal team that is. We're collaborating not only internally, but we have external partners and other people that are stakeholders in the team. So you can actually invite them, and they do not need to have a full Microsoft Office 365 license. And they don't even need a Microsoft account. They can use their Gmail account or something like that, and they can go in and get full access to the chats, the meetings, and files you put in there. There are a few things they can't do. They can access documents. They can't go in and create new channels or things like that, but they have access to everything that's in there. So for chatting, for meetings, for seeing documents, editing documents, adding documents, they can do that. So, you can figure out some other use cases for it. Maybe it's someone you're collaborating with that's a partner in that build out. Maybe you're working on a project with a client and you want your client to be able to go in and see a spreadsheet that you create that has an updated status log of how the project is going. Or you want to ask the client some questions and you want that all centralized around that team. You can actually do that. They can get access to it. They can update it, and it just puts it all in one space. And the nice thing is you don't have to sit there and file emails and file documents because the client's just using Teams and putting stuff right where you want them to. One thing I'll put in here is when you create a team and you invite a guest, the guest has access to everything inside that team, including all the channels. Microsoft is working on a new feature at some point in the future where you can restrict them to only certain channels, but for right now it's the entire team. So you want to be careful when you're setting this up that if you have parts of the team that are internal and private that you don't want the partner or customer to see as a guest, then you might have to create sort of two teams, an internal team, internal project one and external project one. Internal project one, your internal team uses. External project one is a team you'd invite the guests to, and they would have access to things that are just in that. So how do we get into all this? There's a couple different ways. So if you're in Office 365 and you go into the web portal at office.com, you'll click your Start button up in the corner of your web browser, and you'll find your Teams icon, and that'll actually launch your Teams application within a web browser. So that's how it'll exist for many of you. However, there is a full desktop application you can install, and we use that a lot in our office. And it's kind of the best experience. Web browsers are great and they're easy to get into, but the full application, which you have to install separately, even though it's part of Microsoft Office 365, it doesn't install automatically when you install Office like Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. You have to install it separately. So you can do that, or if you need help, give us a call. But once you install it and you log in, you'll have access to all the different teams and things you have access to. And then as I mentioned also, there's a Teams app for, maybe I didn't mention it, there is a Teams app for Apple iOS and for Android. And so if you've got a smartphone or tablet that's based on one of those, you can also install the Teams app there and get access to all of the same things that I'm showing you here. And that's really brilliant because then you have full collaboration, which is great. So if I'm not in the office and someone wants to chat with me, I can actually just bring up Teams on my phone and chat. Or if someone updates a document in Teams and I'm on my phone or my tablet, I can just open up Teams and look at the document, edit the document, add new documents. It's really great. So I'm going to go in and do a demonstration, and let's see. So I've brought up my web browser, and I have already logged into Office, and Microsoft changes these screens quite a bit, so it's going to look a little different from what my initial screenshot in the PowerPoint looks like. But so I've logged in, and I can see all of the web apps that I've got access to. And when I click on the Start menu, I can go to Teams. And you'll see I've got the Microsoft Teams app, which looks a lot like the screenshots I was showing you, inside a web browser. And you'll see what I was showing you. You've got the activity feed, all the chats, and those are individual chats, the different teams, which is what I'm on right now. So if I have activity, see different activity I've got. If I'm doing individual chats, we can see those. Got the different teams. I can see my meetings. So these are all things that I've got within my Outlook, but I'm seeing them there. If I click on files, not only do I see files within Teams, but I see all the files I've worked on because Office 365 tracks all of that for you. And within the web browser, if I click Get App, that'll actually start the download for the full Windows desktop app. So if you want an easy way to get that, you can click here and download it and run the installation. Make sure you get approval from your system administrator that you have rights to install and do all that before you go ahead and do it. And then within Teams, you'll see I've got all the different teams we have set up here. And within each team, we've got an automatic general tab or general channel. And here's conversations back and forth that happen within here. And yeah, that's what it looks like. So I'm going to jump into the full desktop so you can see how that looks. Identical, except this is a full desktop application. But you can see how it looks just like the other. So before you start with creating a team, so in these steps, the first thing is you want to begin with the end in mind. You really want to plan out your team. You don't just want to start adding teams kind of ad hoc willy-nilly without much thought of it, because just like anything, you can start to kind of create a mess for yourself. So you want to really look at the end of how you want this to go and plan out the team and spend a little time to think about it, work with the key people, organize it just like you might organize files and folders on your server. You want to organize how the teams go. And, I've done that work, so I'm going to go ahead and I click down here to join or create a team, and I'm going to create a new team, and I'm going to call this Demo Office Build Out. When you're expansion, there we go. When you're setting up a team, you not only team name and description, but you can also change the privacy of it. So in this case, it becomes a private team, and only team owners can add members. So it'll be a team where it's only the members and owners that are part of that team. But I can also create a public one where anyone in the company could join. So maybe we were having a team thing for just like, fun or holiday party or something like that where the privacy wasn't critical. I might make that public and anyone can go ahead and join that. If it's maybe just something for a particular department like HR or a leadership team, then you'd want to pick private and have that set up. And if you have an existing team you want to have as a template because you've made some customizations and changes or something, you can pick that. Or if you've got an existing group, you can pick that here. But I'm going to assume there's none of that. I'm just going to start from scratch. Go ahead and click Next. And I can go ahead and start adding members here by typing in their name. So if I wanted to add Amanda, I can click her, go ahead and say Add, and now she's going to be a member of that group. And I can go ahead and add additional members. If I want her to be an owner of the group, she'll have greater permissions to add users and manage the overall team. I'll leave her as a member for right now and go ahead and say close. And we now have our demo office build out and our general. And I can go ahead and say and if she's online, she will reply, and all of those conversations will start to show up here. And if I want to add more people, I can do that. If I want to create more channels, get more information about how Teams works, it'll show up there. Now, I mentioned about creating additional channels. So let's say, if we're doing a demo of an office build out, oh, there's Amanda. See, she said hello. And I can just hit here, I can hit reply. If I really like what she says, I can give it a like, just like you do with some of the social media things. I can save it for later and save that message so I can find it easily, which I'll click there and do that. Actually, I'm going to uncheck that. I'll do that in a bit. And there's even more options to copy a link. So everything in, I'm going to skip the link part. That's going to get a little geeky for people. So what are some other channels I might want to have with the demo office build out? So I'm going to say, there's going to be an architecture. And I think I'll create another one for the budget. So now you can see under the demo office build out, we have a general channel. We have a now architecture channel, but notice how there's no conversations there because those are only, right now we've only done them in the general channel. So if I wanted to have something specific about the architecture, I could then put that in here. And of the budget, I can start putting conversations around the budget all within here. So again, if you start to think about how you might already be doing this in another application, like you're texting on your phone or Outlook, you can see how those might be like similar to folders where you're emailing back and forth and then you save the emails and you put them into different folders. This way, it just automatically keeps those conversations within those different channels. So let's say for the budget, I want to go ahead and start getting our files into the budget. And so what I do is I can click on the files, and I got a couple of different options here. If I want to create a new file, I can just go ahead and click New and call it the Excel spreadsheet and say, now it's going to automatically pop that in, and I can go ahead and start putting in my budget numbers. So let's say we have, I'll just put some numbers in here. Now you can see I have main budget for build out. It was modified just now by me. And if I want to go back in and open that up, I can click on it. And it's just going to bring it up as a view right now. Oh, I didn't save at the point. So it's just showing up as a view right now. If I want to go in and edit it, I can actually edit within the main budget. Whoops. And I can close that out. Another thing I can do is view it, and if I want to bring it up in a web browser, I can click here and I can either say, right now by default it's going to edit in Teams. If I want to edit in Excel or Excel Online, I can hit one of these and it'll actually pop open the full version of Excel or the web version of Excel. Okay. And if I want, I can upload a file. So I can click Upload and drop in other documents if I wanted. Those would upload into here automatically. If I wanted to add cloud storage, like I mentioned, you can add in other things. I can click on here and I can bring up SharePoint, Dropbox, Google Drive, or ShareFile, and it'll actually create a link to the documents there, and I can get access to it that way. If I want to create a folder, I can call it there, and so you can create some files and folders, and you can see how you can start to do those kinds of things. So let's say I want to say, hey, Amanda, I really want you to take a look at the budget. So I got a couple things. I can, when I view it, I can go ahead and say, start a conversation. And then when I close and go back to conversations for that channel, close a couple of these. you can see it automatically created a link to this, and I can say, hey, please take a look, see what you think. Now other people could go ahead and reply to it, and that'll automatically say, oh, there's Amanda. Looks great. Thank you, Amanda. You read my mind. Got a little message saying that Amanda replied to it. And now all of that's in here. And I can go ahead and say, here's the main budget for the build out. And I can be on a different, go back to general, go back to budget. And I can actually click here and it'll take me right to that document along with the chat. Pretty cool, huh? So you can also see the files this way. Now let's say, like I said, this budget, this is the kind of thing, we're going to be in this budget a lot. So there's a couple different things I could actually do. I can say make it a tab, which is really simple. So now when I go into the budget channel, I now have this main budget for build out, and I can just click and go right to it. So it added it up here as a tab, and I don't have to sit there and go find it anymore. It's just right there. Another option would be to where is that? Oh, I'll bring that up later. So that's where you can start making use of some of these tabs to change the experience for people so it goes really quickly for them to go ahead and find things. And if there were other things you wanted to add to the tabs, just making sure I'm in the right spot on my demo, you can hit the plus sign, and now you can add additional tabs. So that could be other documents, it could be a OneNote notebook, it could be a link to a PDF. If you've got other types of applications you use, if you're a Wrike user, you can actually click this and you can add links to Wrike. If you're a Microsoft Planner user, you can create a new plan and add that to the tab, and it'll all be listed right there. So super handy. We talked about the chatting. We talked about the collaborating. I think we're getting close to the end here. Let me see if there's anything else I want to show you. So if you look under activity, I can see the activities for the things that I was interested in. So I was interested in this. I'm following this budget. And when Amanda went in and edited or replied to it rather, I can see her listed here. And when I click on it, it takes me right to where it was. So that's handy of those feeds because as people go, you start collaborating with multiple people, it gives you a single place to see all the activity that's happening. If I just want to see what I'm doing, I can click on my activity and you can see here's some things I did, like, okay, I posted in budget. I posted in general. I replied. So it takes you through the things you worked on, which is also great and handy because you can just go, if you're looking for something you did recently and you can't remember exactly what it was, you can go ahead and do that. Oh, I missed a couple of questions here. Thank you, Amanda. Are the members of channels always the same as the team the channel is? Yes. So right now the way it's set up is you have one set of permissions for the entire team and all the channels. If you need to set up separate permissions, you need to set up separate teams for now. As I mentioned before with the guest access, they're going to set up a guest where guests can only have access to certain channels. I would suspect they're going to start to add some more of that feature too, where certain channels have certain rights. Let's see if I missed any other questions. Nope, that's it. So again, so to kind of go through it, if I have any meetings scheduled, I can see them here. Files will show up here. And you can see it updated the recent file I worked on as that main budget for build out. So it can see all of that. If I have additional cloud storage, I can see that here. All the chats I'm involved in, I can see in one place. All my activity, my meetings, go ahead and show that. So in addition to chatting what we were chatting, it can also pick, got Amanda here. If I want to actually meet with her, I can click into an audio call. Or if we have video conferencing available, if we have cameras, we can do a video call. Once those are set up, you can also share your desktop from within there. If I want to add more people and do a multiple conversation with multiple people, I can do that. When I'm chatting back and forth, I can get pretty creative. I can say hi. I can add, little fun emojis that may also be easier to type an emoji than it is to type something else. I can attach documents. I can send a GIF to her. So you can use those. Create stickers to acknowledge people. Oh yeah, good job, Amanda. Those kinds of things. I can also schedule a meeting with Amanda. So if I click on the meeting button, I can go ahead and set this up and where we're going to meet and the date and the details. And that'll set up a meeting that'll show up that we can access through Teams. There's a few other things you can do here. If you've got other apps installed, like weather, I can go ahead and pick some of those things. You can install other apps, and then within those apps, you can bring up other things. Maybe I want to send Amanda the weather report or something like that. I got a couple other questions. What about files in the channel permissions? Again, they have access to everything that's in the channel. If you put additional permissions on a file, like if it's a link to a SharePoint document and you have different permissions on that SharePoint document, they may see the link, but they won't be able to get access to the document. But there are no channel-specific permissions yet. So another question about issues using Teams on iPhones. Nope, I use it all the time. Works great. It's very handy. It's really nice to be able to sit there on my iPhone or my iPad and have access to everything I've shown you, have access to all of that from that device. So I could be in line somewhere, I could be in an off-site meeting, taking a break in another, sometimes I'll take my iPad and go sit in another room to kind of get a different view of the world and have email and other things there, and I can actually have Teams there, so I can respond to chats, I can look at documents, edit documents, do all of that from the iPhone and iPad and Android phones and Android tablets. Same thing is if you have, let's say you've got a desktop computer, but you also have your laptop, you can install Teams on your laptop and your desktop. So wherever you are, you have access to all of that information. And the beauty of the Teams is because it's a cloud service, because it's all set up through Office 365, even if you're outside of your office, any documents you have stored here, you'll be able to access. So if right now you're trying to access documents through a VPN or let's see. Yeah, through a VPN or something like that, you don't have to worry about that anymore. Now, this may or may not be a big replacement for your whole file share if you've got, tens of thousands of files, but you can start to see how you can make this work and, find some good projects where you can pilot it, see what that looks like. Leaf asked if if we create a meeting in Teams, is it going to appear in the Outlook calendar? And the answer is yes, it does. It all integrates as long as you've got Teams connected with your Office 365, as long as you're doing email and calendar through Office 365. Yep, absolutely. So I'm going to turn off mute right now if you guys have any other questions, but think about pilot project. Think about how you could start using this in your organization. It's a cool app. It's very functional. It solves a lot of technical challenges. It gives you access and insight to things people are working on. Really increases the communication, the accountability. Really helps people get things done. So that's why we recommend taking a look at it. And if you need any help with it in administration or setting it up or follow-up training, you can always give us at Tobin Solutions a call. So I'm going to unmute people if you got anything you want to say or anything like that. Again, after this, you will get a survey and a copy of the slides. And if you have any questions, let us know. So everyone is unmuted. Any other questions? Let's see. James has a question about useful as a meeting with outside the organization as Skype, but looks really great for inside. So yeah, so the meeting functionality of Skype is still a little nicer, but they do keep incorporating those features in there. So, I would say give it a try. Your mileage may vary, but if it does work for you, then you've again have that single portal, that single place to go look for everything and not having to go into multiple applications and such. But yep, Microsoft, this is definitely a strategic product for Microsoft, and they're going to keep adding new features and functions and growing what Teams can do. Any other questions? Talk about some other ways we at Tobin use Teams. One is we use it for our leadership meeting. So like I said, we put all our dashboards and our agendas and we put it all in Teams. And when we have conversations around the leadership team, we do that within the Teams app. And that's a private team we set up just for the leadership team. So that's really handy. We use it for we belong to a networking group called Business Networking, and we use it to, right now, one of the roles I have there is the education coordinator. And so we set up a team for that, and I and Amanda help out by putting in new articles on educational moments, things that we can use within that BNI group. And we also, sometimes I can't make it to the meeting and I have other people that fill in for me. They're part of the team. And so when I show up for my networking appointment on Thursdays at 7 a.m., I don't have to really prepare in advance because it's already set up in Teams. I can just open up Teams on my phone. I can grab one of the educational pieces I want to read about, and it's right there all set up. I don't have to email anything back and forth. I don't have to ask for anything. It's all there. And when I'm done, I can just move that document through Teams into a folder that says it's already been used, so it's been flagged. And if someone else in my office, like Kyle, is filling in for me, he can open up the Teams app and just grab one of those documents, and it's all set. We use it for planning events at the office, projects that we're working on. We keep finding new uses for it. In some cases, it's really starting to replace a lot of the things we're doing on our traditional file shares with the folders and files on the server. Any other questions from anyone? All right. Well, I guess we're going to wrap up then. Thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciated your participation and for hearing what Teams can do for you. We look forward to being able to help you with this or anything else in the future. So feel free to give us a call for this or anything else. And have an awesome day. Take care. Thank you all. You're welcome, Tim.